normal people, so it's kind of normalized for us for these abnormal failure, weak qualities um, that we have in us because we're so like we view mainstream and what's popularized, and we love like serial killer murderers and all those strange things. So it's kind of been normalized instead of
Yeah.
focusing on what you said, like areas of success or people who've done it before and embodying it. And then even he said in the book, if you learn how to tie your shoes or even felt that little success once, you can do it and you could just like feel how you felt in that moment you finished tying your shoes, accomplished and successful. And going
Yeah.
back to that success feeling, even though the other success that your goal that you're working towards, you haven't gone there yet, but that feeling is kind of the same. So just focus on that feeling.
And I love that because a lot of the times we feel that success has to be a big thing. But
Hmm.
I feel that, for the most part, we all have been successful in one thing or another, whether it's learning how to tie your shoes, learning how to walk, and I love how you brought that point of like bringing in that feeling of how I was maybe when you first learned how to ride your bike. How did that feel? And I feel that it's very similar to just everything we do in life. It's like that
Hmm.
feeling of accomplishment, like, wow, I fell and I fell so many times, but now I'm riding my bike and here we go. And it feels good and it feels natural because that's the way our mind works. We learn by repetition,
Hmm.
repeating, and then we fail. Let's figure something else out. Let's do it in a different way, and trying until we get there. And I think that for the most part is training ourselves to know that we fall, we
Hmm.
get back up, we figure it out, we learn from that mistake, and then we just get better and better. And that is applied for everything.
Yes. And it reminds me when you said that we could try again and again because our mind is like a computer, and in the book it says it has stored information, so our past memories, past experiences. So if we focus on the stored memory or information of our failures, we're gonna kind of get that in our mind, but we have that image or storage of ourselves as resilient, standing back up when we fall again and again. Like it really does kind of ingrain that program in us to keep on going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna piggyback on that
Mhm.
because that reminds me of like, our self-image imprinting, and how, like you mentioned, like, a lot of times if we fail in a certain thing, then we start to imprint, that as like, oh, we're failures or we might not be good enough or
Mhm.
whatnot. And a lot of the times, because we want to make sense of things, we bring meaning to it. We make it personal, right? Oh, that must mean I'm not smart enough. Oh, that must mean X, Y, and Z. But without really questioning, like, those beliefs, like, is this really true? Like, is this always like this? We don't take the time to really question,
Mhm.
we're so fast to bring a meaning to it because our brain just wants to like process like and make sense of what just happened you know
Yes, that makes perfect sense, and it's like we give the meaning and it's like, "I am a failure," not, "I failed this task.
exactly,
Like, we automatically identify with that failure
exactly.
instead of, yeah, like, "I failed this task." It's kind of like when I'm kind of relating it to kind of like AI when you write the script and the AI is not giving you the results. Not like I need to rewrite the script. It's like kind of like the machine's stupid, Like it's like no, you just need to format the script in a way that it understands, like feedback.
Yeah, it's feedback. Yeah. And if we were
Mhm.
just to take everything as feedback, then how different would our life be,
Mhm.
Because, it's kind of like, as one of our mentors, Joe says, like, having a problem is a good thing. And the reason why is because then we're able to really look at ourselves, reflect, and kind of see what what are we generalizing? What are we giving meaning to? And we're able to kind of just go back and reassess and then move forward, instead of like sinking with it, feeling stuck with it, and but it's like more about questioning it,
Mm-hmm.
questioning like what happened, is this always like this, kind of like NLP, where is
Yes.
it always like this? According to who? Who
Mm-hmm.
said this? Like, who formed this belief? Is this belief true to me? You start to kind of like break it down, kind of like that onion of like, and then you're like, wait a minute. Yeah, things are not as bad as I thought it were. I'm not, as how we call ourselves like failures as we think we are. This is just part of life.
It is just zooming out and bringing the awareness. So it brings me to a question I have for you. So, can you give us an example of a time that I wrote it down? An example of a small success that motivated you to keep on going when you were forming a new self-image?
Yeah. So I think the fact of, growing up with the self-image of having social anxiety, that was my persona. Like everyone knew me as a shy, quiet girl. But the truth about it is that I never been shy or quiet. It's just like my severe social anxiety. So being portrayed as that really like made me a little upset
Mm-hmm.
because that's not who I am. That's just like a protective mechanism because I never been really shy. It's just, how I've been portrayed to be. And being able to break out of that and like starting to teach classes, in the gym, having that mic on, and really forming that self-image of the person that speaks with confidence, that stands in front of the crowd and has fun and speaks her voice, expresses herself. That was a long time in the making,
Mm-hmm.
but I continue to imagine and I continue to work with my nervous system to say, hey, you're not in a survival state right now. This is exciting. You're going to have fun because this is who we are choosing to be,
Mm-hmm.
and it took a lot of work of like being able to be in front of a class of people and not show that my nervous system was like super shocked, like of like everyone looking at me. But at the same time, it was like the more that I reassure I'm safe, this is what we're excited to do, the more natural that I became, the more
Mm-hmm.
of this is who I am, and breaking out of that just made me feel like that freedom to express myself and really do the work that I love doing, which I love performing, I love speaking, I love like motivating people. Like that's been in me like this whole time, but yet it was so blocked because I formed an image that was not me based on survival mechanisms, right?
Wow, that's such a complete transformation from like social anxiety and being known as the shy girl to whoa, like having this mic on and teaching a class. That's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, and for sure it was not easy. Like it took like it was years in the making, and to this point I'm still taking vocal lessons,
Mm-hmm.
to really strengthen my just like my vocals, like learn how to speak properly. And every day it's like a practice of reading out loud, just really getting comfortable with my voice. So I tell you, it's like it takes sometimes years in the making, but like you mentioned, once you have that creative mechanism of like something that you're reaching towards, then you start to reframe things, start to question things, and sometimes it feels like I'm not moving anywhere, but sometimes it's like going back and thinking what I was before, that old
Mm,
self-image to what I am now. I was like, wow, I'm really proud of myself. Let me give myself a little
yeah,
pat in the back.
exactly. So it sounds like you fed your brain this image of you as a speaker, confident, teaching classes, and then your like the subconscious could just kind of like worked for you to get you to this new self-image.
Exactly. And I would say that I had a lot of pushback.
Mhm.
Um, but I feel that that's part of the process of being able to go past those limitations or those challenges. I would say, I had this person that, it was like a coach that was like teaching us how to teach a class, a fitness class. And because my voice was not as loud and on and so forth, he straight out said, I don't think you should be a coach. I don't think you should be like a good fitness instructor, you know,
Mhm.
because your voice, you're too quiet. You don't have like the energy and things
That's
like
like
that. And I was like,
that's the old self-image trying to get you back, like, "Don't leave."
yeah, and that hurts. That's painful,
Mhm.
and I remember like just crying in my car, like, what am I doing? Like, is this really right? Is he right? Or do I keep going? But that's part of the challenge of like you get all this pushback, especially around people that have known you to be a certain way, and
Yes,
and it
yes.
makes them uncomfortable to know that you're changing and that you're becoming your true like expression of yourself. And so you're going to get a lot of pushback, and especially in weight loss, as well, because like if you're used to having a certain lifestyle and people around you start to notice that maybe you're eating healthier and you're not along the same path as them. It's like, what? Are you sure you want to eat a salad? I don't know. Like it's salads are boring.
Isn't it crazy?
There's like so much, but that's just part of it, that's part of the growth. That's part of like you questioning yourself, like, do I really want to keep going, you know?
And in that moment where, you were in your car and doubting yourself, what made you decide to go on? Like, is it because the self-image you had just kind of just you were just you knew it was so close in your future that like what made you continue versus go back to that old self?
Um, it was, I mean, through my life, I received a lot of pushback.
Mhm.
Um, and it was kind of like the anger of like, like people see me as a shy girl, quiet girl. Like, who do they think they are to say who I am? I just had like so much of that anger, you know, in me where I'm like, I'll show them.
Sometimes that's like productive anger, yes.
It was productive anger. Like, I'll show them, like, okay, they'll see. And I kept continuing to really visualize and see myself in front of that classroom, like teaching these classes. And I continue and continue. And even though, like I said, it was so hard,
Mhm.
to the point where a lot of the time my leg was shaking, like my feet was shaking of how nervous I was.
The
But I
body
kept
wanted to
going.
run.
I wanted to run, throw up. I don't know.
That's what it takes to get through. Sometimes you just gotta get through it.
Exactly, but
That's
now
the
it's
other
like I love
side.
it, you know?
Mhm. And now it's easy, smooth, you don't have to think about it, automatic, it's, like, natural to you.
It's so natural. I mean, of course, there's times like if I'm doing something different, it takes a little while to kind of like, okay, like this is different. This is a different environment, different
Mhm.
people. But then it's like, okay, I've done this before many times. It's natural, like I form like more of a familiar.
Mhm.
I made myself very familiar with being who I am now.
Yes, and that's amazing story, and I love the
Yeah,
tools that you used.
exactly, exactly. And also say like, this book, like I carry this with me, like I think I started reading like 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And on and off, and I always going back to it. And this book really made that shift for me. And of course, that's another reason, like you, that I got into hypnotherapy because I wanted to know how. it's like I wanted answers. I wanted to know that I'm not I was determined not to stay the way I was. You know, that determination, like looking for answers, being curious. Like, if this person is doing this, why can't I do it? You know,
Mhm.
you start to really like form that, like the warrior, you get into this warrior state of like, no, like I gotta figure this out. Like, I'm not staying like this. And that's how you move forward. Like, finding the answers, finding the mentors, the certifications, the courses to push past that.
Yes, I think it's so true how you get to this point where it's like, I cannot be like this, like, cannot go on like this, my ways. And it makes you
Exactly.
go and search out for these answers. And sometimes, yeah, it has to be, you have to feel not like bad or to be like, this is not what I want. And sometimes, like, being familiar and getting it, um, we go through that and then we have to do it again because we get used to the self-image and sometimes, okay, it's time to change our self-image again and we have to do this process again, which is uncomfortable and it's gonna be like the doubt's gonna creep in again every time we go and level up, basically.
Exactly. That's You said it so perfectly. And that goes with everything, every phase in our life, whether it's relationships, career, financials. And talking about financial, it's kind of like, if you've never been the person that has earned 100K,
Mhm.
the self-image is not there. Uh, so you have to continue to work with that self-image of how is it for a person that makes 100K a year? How do they carry themselves? How do they educate themselves financially? What books do they read? How do they invest? To
Mhm.
start to train, it's kind of like a ladder. You got to take step one, step two, and then really become familiar with what that is to feel like, experiencing it in your body, and really feel it in your body as if you already have it,
Yeah,
you know, and to become so familiar, and then you start to really attract, things in the outside world.
that makes sense, and it reminds me of school, like, once you're learning once you're comfortable at senior year, whoop, you're in a new grade, a new school, and you're at the bottom, it's uncomfortable. You gotta learn again.
Exactly. And that goes back to having always like the learner mindset,
Mhm.
because and being very humble about it. Like, like I said, every time I read this book, there's always something new. Like my mind is ready for this next thing to understand, because once you think you know, then something happens where you're like, you don't know at all. What you thought you knew is not even close to what it is. And there's like those layers upon layers of growing that consciousness to evolve, right? Take you to the next level and to the next level. So this is a very patient process. You have to be very patient, very trusting, to be
Very
able
trust
to.
especially when you're dealt with, like, the trainer coming in with that making you doubt yourself, that's when you have to have that trust and that resistance for sure. Doesn't matter in the
Exactly.
good moments and those down bad moments that matter.
Exactly. And I always call those people like angels in my life, the people that have given me pushback, because they have shaken me up to really humble myself and ask myself, do I really want this?
Mhm.
Like, because there are those people in our life that will question you, like, do you really want this?
Yeah.
And those are like souls working with you. If you really want to put in that perspective, at the moment you're like that person, you're all mad. But then once you look at it from that perspective, it's like, wow, do I really want this? Do I really want to work for this? This
Yeah.
is, and then that kind of like humbles you to continue doing that work, to continue in your evolution. And that's how I see it. That's how I see my angels, like
Mhm.
really challenging me, making me like really like question myself.
Yeah, no, it's good that you brought that up because I totally believe too that the universe tests you right before you're about to get something, where you're about to become something. Like, oh, you really want this? Then overcome this to prove that you want this. Then I'll
Exactly.
give it to you, or I don't
E-
know, or something like that. Like, show me you want it.
exactly. And it's
Mhm.
exactly. And a lot of the times, thinking about it, like every time that we're building a skill in whatever way or form, whether it's cooking, learning about financials, learning about like our hypnotherapy skills, we're it's a never, stopping. You're always building upon that skill, whatever that is, whether it's tying your shoe, riding your bike, whatever. You always continue to practice and get better, right? So it's kind of like any type of feedback we get, whether it's like if I go back to my time when I was a hairdresser, where I'll get a complaint like, oh, this side is more higher than the other one, and then we kind of get a little triggered, like, what?
Like,
But
that's just
then
pretend.
that's like bringing you back into the practice. Like, maybe I gotta learn more. Maybe I gotta
Mhm.
strengthen my skills a little bit more. And that's all that it is. And whatever we do, it's just like feedback is a way to grow.
And that's so important how you said always have like a growth mindset and a learner's mentality, because people when they say like, "Oh, I don't need to learn anything. I already know everything." That's when you know like you're not growing, or you're like capping yourself at your growth.
Exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
And I would say, like my clients, they always help me grow. Like I'm always learning something new,
Mhm.
and something that I'm like, oh, let me look into that, or let me or whatever it is. And I'm always like getting that as like, okay, like let me learn a little bit more about this or that. And that's what it is, not really taking anything personal.
Mhm.
It's like, the book that the three agreements.
The 4 agreements,
Oh,
or
the fourth agreement. Yeah.
yeah.
How one of the agreements is like not taking anything personal.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's
It's
so
hard to do.
it's so important, and that relates to just another way to say it is like the Buddhist philosophy of non-attachment, like don't be attached and make it not personal, basically, because that's the
Yeah,
root of all suffering. Once we give it that meaning, give it that attachment to that thought, the feeling, the place, the person, a location. Sometimes we're attached to a place that, and that attachment is blocking us from moving somewhere because we're attached to the place we grew up in or the place we were born. Yeah.
exactly. And I feel like because as humans, we crave security, we crave that stability. So we attach to things, we attach to people, environment, and so forth because that's like our security blanket, I feel like.
Yes.
But in your own personal experience, like how do you feel like you work in regards to not forming too much attachment to an outcome or to an environment to kind of like allow you to not take things personal, but be able to like move, not putting too much energy into that, be able to move forward.
It's definitely knowing, okay, one of the principles, like, once you know that attachment is the root of all suffering, it makes you not want to attach as much because no one wants to suffer. And another
Right.
thing is zooming out, big picture level, because sometimes our problems, we have a problem, we're like laser focused and just time distortion. It's like focused on this problem, but instead just zooming out and having the mindset that everything is working out in my favor and all that is coming to me is good. And if it's not good, that's not the end of the story. Don't just cut the story at like an obstacle or a bad day or anything. So it's basically just having that bigger picture that things are working out for me always.
Hmm.
So it doesn't really matter what's at this bad moment, because eventually it's gonna lead me to the good, and it's gonna teach me something. There is no failure, only feedback type of mindset. So that really keeps me resilient and going. Mhm.
Exactly. I love that. And it kind of reminds me of like having that appreciation for what is,
Mhm.
and instead of always focusing on like what's going wrong or what we're lacking, it's like having the appreciation for what is right now and
Mhm.
accepting what is, and then being able to like just continue moving forward. And
Yeah, exactly. And I know you shared examples of a self-image of you that you were becoming when you were a